maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
You are live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Jim Acosta in Washington. President Biden today arriving in Uvalde, Texas, where the sun is shining, but a light has been extinguished, where summer plans turned to funeral plans, where just days ago, 19 children were full of life. Now life-size memorials stand silently in their place. The President and First Lady laid hands on those photos today. Those children and 2 teachers lost at the hands of a gunman inside Robb Elementary School. The town of just 16,000 people is overwhelmed with loss. The Bidens attended Mass at Sacred Heart Catholic Church, where an influx of funerals is imminent. They are also meeting privately with the victims' families this afternoon. So many of them want an answer to an excruciating question. Would their loved ones be here today if police had acted sooner? The Justice Department is now stepping in, saying it will conduct a review of the law enforcement response as a top Texas official admits the decision not to breach the classroom, even as the children were calling 911, begging for help, was wrong, period. CNN's Arlette Saenz is in Uvalde. Arlette, some raw emotion as the president visited the site of that school memorial today.
Yeah, Jim, it's certainly an incredibly emotional day for President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden as they are here on the ground in the community of Uvalde, Texas, grieving with the community in the wake of that horrific massacre at the elementary school right behind me. At this moment, President Biden is meeting privately with survivors and family members of the victims lost. 19 young children and 2 teachers gunned down while simply at their day of school here on Tuesday. The president first made that stop here at the memorial at Robb Elementary School, taking in each of the photos, the crosses representing each of the lives lost. He and his wife spent some time looking into the eyes of these children in those photos to fully take in the moment in the experience of what these families are enduring at this time. But even while the president has been here with the goal of offering comfort, he has also been pushed by members of the community to do more. Here at the elementary school, there was one demonstrator that shouted at both the Texas governor and also President Biden, telling them to act. And the president also faced more demonstrators as he left Mass at Sacred Heart Catholic Church. Take a look at both of those moments earlier today.
President Biden, we need help! We need help, President Biden!
So you heard those chants there, do something, and President Biden very explicitly mouthing the words, we will. Of course, there are so many questions of what that action will actually be. The president himself has said that there's little more he can do via executive action on gun control. The White House insisting that it is time for Congress to act. And when you talk to people here, one person I spoke to said they want to see more gun laws. They want to see more resources devoted to mental health, and they are waiting to see answers from their elected officials to try to prevent future tragedies like this. So right now, at the moment, the president trying to offer those words of comfort. He's expected to spend roughly 3 hours, possibly more, with those families as he is grieving with them as they are experiencing these gut-wrenching losses of their young children.
And Arlette, you can just hear the pain and the voices of those people in the community pleading for the help of the President of the United States. Arlette Saenz, thank you very much. Joining me now, Texas Congressman Joaquin Castro. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. As you know, the president is meeting with the families of the victims today. You were in Uvalde yesterday, and I know you met with some of them. What did you hear from them?
Oh, Jim, obviously just unimaginable pain and grief and suffering. And a few things. First, they want to find out why it took law enforcement so long, by some estimates over an hour, to take out the shooter. And I don't think we've seen that in any other situation like this, perhaps ever, where it took law enforcement that long. And they're wondering why their kids and why Uvalde, Texas. Also, they're concerned about their kids who still have to go back to school next year. They don't want to go back to Robb Elementary. They want the state and the federal government to work together to make sure that, they can go to a different school, a new school. So I hope that President Biden and Governor Abbott will work together with the legislature and the Congress to make that happen. And just, it's just an incredible suffering that these people are going through. And they want change in gun laws. They want gun safety and gun reform. People kept telling me, I don't know how it is that in Texas, an 18-year-old can't buy beer and cigarettes, but they can walk into a gun store and buy an AR-15. That makes no sense. And over the years, as the Republican Party in Texas has been overtaken by this gun mania and the NRA mania, Greg Abbott has made it easier for dangerous people to get dangerous weapons in their hands.
And Congressman, the Justice Department is going to conduct a review now of the law enforcement response in Uvalde. I know you've been calling for the FBI to investigate. Is it enough what the Justice Department is saying they will do at this point?
Well, I'm glad that the Justice Department is listening, and they're going to do a review of the law enforcement response. Like I said, I think everybody was shocked that it took an hour for law enforcement to go in there and finally take out the shooter. And by the way, it wasn't just local law enforcement. There were local, state, and federal law enforcement officers there, all of whom waited a significant amount of time before going in, because now you see people starting to blame each other. And so, look, I hope that they do a thorough and comprehensive report, because that's what the families deserve.
And Congressman, have you gotten any indication just in your inquiry that you've launched as to what was going on with that delayed response? I mean, we heard what law enforcement officials said, that some of them didn't want to get shot and so on. Have you been able to figure this out?
I wish that I could say that I have more answers than what all of us have been privy to, but I don't. I'm just as mystified and disturbed as everyone else.
And what did the FBI say when you asked for them to, I guess, launch an inquiry?
Well, they said that they were working independently, but in partnership with DPS and local law enforcement to figure out what happened, that they would come up with a comprehensive timeline. They were in the process of reviewing all of the video footage from the school. Apparently the funeral home across the street, which he shot at, also had video footage. They are in possession of all the body cam footage that the different officers had on them. So they were reviewing that. They were reviewing the shooter's social media, his cell phone. They believed, and I think it's been reported, that he was in touch with somebody in Germany. I believe they told me that it looked like he may have been in touch with somebody from London as well. And so they're gathering all of that information to try to make sure that they're able to give an accurate accounting of what happened and why it happened. Because God knows we've already gotten 2 or 3 or 4 different versions of the facts so far from state officials.
That's exactly right. And earlier we heard this moment when a Uvalde resident was shouting at the president before that same person was shouting at Governor Abbott. Let's listen to that.
Please, Governor Abbott, help Uvalde County. We need change. We need change, Governor. We need change. Our children don't deserve this.
I mean, Congressman, you're just hearing people shouting, pleading with the President of the United States, pleading with the Governor of Texas for help on this. I mean, you can hear the desperation in their voices.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of visceral anger and visceral emotion. And that's right. People, they should be upset, obviously. But you got to make sure that ultimately that energy and that anger is directed at the people that have been standing in the way of gun reform. Remember, Democrats in the House of Representatives and Congress passed H.R. 8, universal background checks, that's supported by 90% of Americans. We passed that over a year ago, and it's been sitting languishing in a Senate where Republicans won't let it get through. Now, I will say this, Democrats could get rid of the filibuster to be able to pass gun reform. So either you get rid of the filibuster and pass it with Democratic votes, or you got to convince these Republicans who have been slaves to the NRA that they got to change their tune and finally decide that they're going to do something on gun safety and gun reform.
And speaking of new gun safety measures, Kamala Harris, the vice president, yesterday, she called for an assault weapons ban. You've co-sponsored an assault weapons ban. The president has talked about an assault weapons ban. There was one in the United States in the mid-1990s to about 2004. After it expired, mass shootings went up after they had gone down during the course of that ban. How do you make it happen? How do Democrats make it happen?
Well, I think that if legislators from both parties, but especially the folks, the Republicans that have been standing in the way of this, because you have over 200 Democratic sponsors on that bill in the House of Representatives, if they listen to the American people, that ban is supported. That policy change is supported by over 2/3 of Americans because they see what these weapons of war do on the street. There's a physical element to this. These folks can fire off 15 or 20 rounds and injure or kill 15 or 20 people in a matter of seconds with an AR-15 before you even have a chance to turn around. So you've got to do one of two things. Either you've got to get the AK-47s and the AR-15s and the semi-automatic handguns off the street, or you've got to ban high-capacity magazines so it accomplishes the same thing, and you can't shoot 20 people in 5 seconds.
All right. Congressman Joaquin Castro, I know we're going to continue this conversation. Thanks for making time for us this evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, protesters gather outside the NRA convention in Houston after back-to-back shootings. We'll head there live and get reaction from an NRA board member. That's next.
Wherever you go in the world, one airline goes further to make it feel exceptional. Qatar Airways, going places together.
It's a mystery that gripped the world.
If you have Madeline, let her come home to her mummy, daddy, brother and sister.
A young girl's disappearance from a seaside resort.
Please give our little girl back.
15 years later, a major break.
Portuguese authorities have said that they have named a suspect.
CNN investigates.
So to be clear, the formal suspect is a convicted rapist and a known pedophile.
Missing Madeleine McCann, Saturday.
Before the Second World War, much of the German watchmaking industry was centered in Saxony. One of the most important brands there was A. Lange & Söhne, known for the supreme excellence of its watches. After the war, Saxony became part of communist East Germany. Lange as a company disappeared when the communists bundled together all of the watch companies in the town. But Walter Lange, the great-grandson of the founders, escaped to the West. In 1990, after the Iron Curtain collapsed, Walter Lange returned to the town and revived the company. A huge task, but he succeeded. But what always hits me about this watch is the dial. The dial of a watch is not a big space, so when you try to arrange the elements on it asymmetrically, you are playing with design fire. But Lange succeeds brilliantly.
My name's Pippa Bailey. I work for Ipsos and I'm head of our climate change and sustainability practice. So many companies that we speak to struggle with, how to talk about sustainability, how to share the great campaigns that they're doing. And there's kind of a number of guidelines people need to follow. First of all, making sure you've got your own house in order, that your own environment, social and governance policies are heading in the right direction before you then go kind of on the offensive with a campaign where you want to illustrate what great work you're doing. But also to kind of avoid greenwashing is making sure that that really fits under the brand banner, that it represents what your brand is about, so that it feels very intuitive for consumers, for citizens.
Times has published a visual depiction of how many times in the last decade the United States has witnessed a mass casualty event in which the perpetrator was able to legally purchase a gun. Take a look at this. I've got it right here on the desk. Uvalde, Buffalo, Boulder, Atlanta, Dayton, El Paso, Virginia Beach, Thousand Oaks, Pittsburgh, Parkland, Sutherland Springs, Las Vegas, Orlando, Roseburg, Oak Creek. All mass shootings where the gunman was able to buy the weapon legally. I'm joined now by NRA board member Judge Philip Journey. Judge, thank you for being with us. For years, your group has blocked new gun safety laws and pushed for the most relaxed rules possible on firearms. Isn't some of this blood on the NRA's hands?
Well, let me first say, Jim, thanks for having me on the show. I want to tell you that I really don't believe the supposition of your question is accurate. I know that while I'm not a spokesperson for anybody, I followed the issue closely, and that the NRA and other organizations, even myself as a state senator in Kansas, have worked to tighten the laws. I think that it's important to understand that it's necessary that these laws actually...
I hope you understand. I'm going to have to cut you off when you start saying things that just aren't true. The NRA has not worked to tighten rules. That's just not the case. The NRA for years, for decades, has pushed for the most relaxed rules possible in this country, and that's why we have mass shooting after mass shooting after... Please, if you could answer the question that I asked you at the beginning of the interview, isn't this blood on your hands?
I'm not the one that pulled the trigger, and neither are the members of the National Rifle Association. I think Buffalo is a great example where the alarms were going off in New York and all the officials did was hit the snooze button. He could have easily been processed through a care and treatment action. He was a danger to himself or others. He'd already threatened mass shooting prior, and nobody did anything until...
Well, if he's a troubled young man, should he be able to go out and buy an AR-15 assault rifle or style assault rifle, which is what happened in Buffalo, which is what happened in Uvalde. Your group is holding its convention in Houston, where you are right now, just a few days after the massacre in Uvalde. We saw Donald Trump dancing on stage at the end of his remarks.
He was not. I was there. He was not dancing.
How is any of this at all appropriate? We're showing it on stage right now. He's doing a little jig there. People are waving their NRA hats and so on. It's this celebratory atmosphere right after a mass shooting where all of these kids are gunned down. How is that appropriate?
I think that what you're doing is just telling part of the story there, because at the beginning of his speech, he did do a very memorable memorial for the victims. And he did make comments that were appropriate, but that's not the part that seems to be getting out.
Right, but why even have the convention? So, why not cancel the convention out of some measure of decency? Why not have some decency for these kids? They just lost their lives. Couldn't you postpone the convention, have it some other time?
The timing was almost impossible to address that question the way you want us to, because the vendors were already here and already set up. The contracts were already entered into. We were able to do that in 1999.
Well, and there are mass shootings all the time, too, I suppose.
We had a few weeks to do that.
I want to get your reaction to what the survivors of Tuesday's school shooting told CNN. Let's listen.
Do you ever want to go back to school?
I don't want to know what, because I don't want anything to do with another shooting and me in the school.
You scared it might happen again?
And I know it might happen again, probably.
I have the fear of guns now because I'm scared someone might shoot me.
What do you say to these children who say they're afraid somebody is going to shoot them if they go back to school?
Well, I say to the children that we all pray for you and we all want to lift you up in prayer, that we want to have hope that you get through this without the consequences that we see so often in victims of domestic crime. I practiced law for 25 years and I've been a judge in criminal court for over 14 years, and now I'm doing family law. So I do think I understand what's in the best interest of children. I've been doing thousands of cases. I deal with domestic violence every day. And let me say that there are other issues
can people
that we
bring
can
an
make
AR-15 in your
progress
courtroom?
on, and there are things we can.
Can people bring an AR-15 in your courtroom?
We can work together.
Can people bring an AR-15 in your courtroom? Can somebody bring an AR-15 in your courtroom, Judge?
Well, of course not. That's kind of a loaded question.
Why not?
Of course not.
Let me ask you this: NRA supporters keep saying
And you know, it's also important to remember that bringing a firearm on a school in Texas is a felony also.
Well, people don't seem to have much trouble if they want to unleash that kind of destruction to do just that. You know, NRA supporters like yourself, they keep saying that the answer to all of this is good guys with guns. The 19 good guys with guns failed in Uvalde. The cops were there in the school. There was a school resource officer who apparently was MIA, and none of that helped.
Well, I think the issue of law enforcement at Uvalde is a separate question from what we're talking about here today. Their performance has left something to be desired. Even the head of the Texas Department of Public Safety gave an enlightening press conference just the other day. I'm sure you're aware of it too.
With these mass shootings, it keeps coming back to the AR-15 and similar models. Why do people need an AR-15 anyway?
You know, it's just a semi-automatic rifle. I mean, you know, if you want to be prejudiced about the way it looks, but I was aware of what happened in the '94 semi-automatic firearms ban, and there were rifles of similar function that just didn't look as ugly. They weren't black guns like a Mini 14, Ruger Mini 14. And of course, the Ruger Mini 14 was appropriate and the AR-15 was not if it had a bayonet lug or a vertical rear grip. So they designed around
I do want to ask you about the assault weapons ban, but you know, on the AR-15, how is it that an 18-year-old can buy an AR-15 style rifle and have 1,600 rounds of ammo with them like we saw in Uvalde?
Well, he did not have any prior convictions. He didn't have any prior issues that would have kept him from purchasing one. It's my understanding from the news that he purchased it through a firearms dealer. He passed the background check because he didn't have any prior convictions.
Right, but should an 18-year-old have an AR-15?
That's how he bought it.
Should an 18-year-old have an AR-15? What's he going to do with it?
I don't know. Should an 18-year-old have one in the Army?
Well, they have military training in the Army. This 18-year-old in Uvalde did not have military training. He turned 18 and he went out and bought an AR-15.
And the fact is that these kinds of issues are far more complicated than whether we remove something from the public. These issues in criminogenics
you can't
and
buy
trying
a beer
to
if you're
resolve
18. You can't buy a pack of cigarettes.
Violent crime are more complicated than the easy answer. Do you want to know why politicians seem to go to gun control? Because it doesn't cost them any money. Fixing the mental health system in this country costs money. I mean, I was around in the Senate, and before I lived in Topeka, when I watched them shut down the state mental hospitals and turn everyone out into the streets, hoping that the community-based mental health would work. And then they wonder why they don't show up every day to take their meds.
Judge, let me ask you this.
This kid was troubled.
Well, we have troubled people all over the world. There's mental illness all over the world. We're the only country that has these mass shootings over and over again. Let me ask you this. You take issue with Wayne LaPierre. You've been trying to have him
There have been several other mass shootings all over the world.
From the leadership, not to the level that we have in the United States. Come on. You take issue with how Wayne LaPierre has run the NRA. I know you want him removed from the organization. This may surprise people, but back in 1999, he testified that he was in favor of background checks to include gun shows. Let's watch.
We think it's reasonable to provide mandatory instant criminal background checks for every sale at every gun show. No loopholes anywhere for anyone.
He says no loopholes.
I'm aware of that.
He says no loopholes. How do you, why doesn't the NRA have that position now when a overwhelming majority of Americans support universal background checks? Why are you standing in the way of what the overwhelming majority of Americans
If you would
wants?
let me answer, if you would if you would just not put words in my mouth and let me answer the question, that would be appreciated. But the reality is that it's the states that are the soft hole in the background check system. They don't report felony convictions. They don't report commitments, involuntary commitments, when people are found to be a danger to themselves or others. There are states that have millions of convictions sitting in a database because they're waiting on the federal government to pay for their employees to input it into the system. The system is flawed because the state's input is flawed.
Isn't the system flawed because your organization stands in front of just about any reasonable piece of gun control legislation that comes through the Congress? Don't you feel any responsibility in all of this?
If I could explain, the reality is that we've worked in Congress to have these systems in the individual states improved. We've urged the funding with the NICS-FIX Act that was passed during the Trump administration to try to get the states to get their records up to snuff. And the reality is that they're not.
But we're still having mass shootings.
If they don't put the felony conviction,
Judge,
if they don't put the felony conviction in the system, they pass the background check.
Judge, over and over and over.
Where shooters.
Over and over and over, Judge.
Over and over.
We have these mass shootings. Isn't it finally time to say that your way doesn't work? It just doesn't work.
The way we're doing it doesn't work, but the way that we're not making it work is making the background system work effectively, because the states will not do their share of the job. The federal government and NCIC over in West Virginia do a great job compiling the records, doing the background checks, and making sure that individuals are barred from purchasing firearms. But then, of course, they're not prosecuted for their attempt. Now, maybe we should start prosecuting convicted felons who are trying to buy guns, because we get thousands of them.
I know, but Judge, we hear that all the time.
Denied.
And you have these 18-year-old kids shooting up shopping centers and schools and everything. They're not felons, they're just kids, and they have access to an ocean of guns in this country. It's an ocean, we're swimming in guns.
Well, we do have per capita a high number of firearms in this country.
Yeah.
But, the vast majority of them are not AR-15s that you're complaining about. There's very little difference functionally between that and any other semi-automatic firearm that's been around for over 100 years.
If there's nothing different, why do they use them to shoot up shopping malls and supermarkets and schools? The AR-15 is the weapon of choice. They're used to hunt people.
I can't read their minds. I guess you'll just have to ask them. I don't know why. I think people buy things for lots of different reasons. Why don't you commit
right here, sir, that you will help get some semblance of gun safety sanity here in Washington? Could you make that commitment right now to do everything that you can?
I would be happy to sit down and talk with just about anybody that won't insult me. The reality is that there are talks going on right now in Washington, as I understand it, in the Senate. And we'll see what they come up with.
We need action because our children are dying, sir. Our children are dying, Judge. I'm sorry. That's all the time we had. But I just have to say, I think that you and your organization, honestly, I'm 51 years old. This has been going on for decades. And it just seems to me that the NRA just has to look into its soul. And I'm sorry to say it that way, sir, but you and your other board members need to look into your souls and see what can be done for these kids who keep dying over and over again, I'm sorry, that's all the time we have. Judge, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
thank you.
You bet.
Coming up, demanding change. I'll talk to the Uvalde man who was among the onlookers today shouting for leaders to do something on gun violence.
World Sport.
World Sport.
For World Sport, I'm Coy Wyatt.
I'm Amanda Davis.
I'm Andy Scholes.
I'm Don Riddell.
I'm Alex Thomas.
I'm Patrick Snell.
And this
is CNN.
I'm Delia Gallagher in Rome, and this is CNN.
Connect the World with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the World with Becky Anderson, Monday through Friday on CNN.
I'm Jim Bitterman in Paris, and this is CNN.
Anger and outrage felt in Uvalde after a gunman massacred 19 children and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary. Those emotions boiled over for some residents as President Biden and Texas Governor Abbott visited the memorial at the school today.
Please, Governor Abbott, help Uvalde County. We need change. We need change, Governor. We need change. Our children don't deserve it.
Just painful to watch. The outrage continued minutes later, directed at President Biden.
President Biden, we need help! We need help, President Biden!
You can just hear the desperation in those voices. And joining me now is Ben Gonzalez, the Uvalde resident that you heard shouting those words at Governor Abbott and President Biden, along with other folks there in the crowd. Ben, you live less than a mile from the school. You actually attended 4th grade there. 3 of your kids are in the same school district as Robb Elementary School. My goodness, why was it important for you to speak out today? And am I feeling this right? It just feels like desperation is what I heard in the voices of those people there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Acosta. Thank you for having me on. I never intended to reach out like this or get an interview or anything like that. It was never my intention, but being there at the scene and seeing two leaders that can make such a huge difference in our community, I was just overcome with emotion, and it just came out.
Yeah. Take me back to that day, because I know one of your sons, he knows some of the victims. Tell us, what your family's going through, what other people that you know are going through.
So the community is just, as everybody knows by now, we're just a small, tight-knit community, and everybody knows everybody in some way, shape, or form. My son, my 8-year-old son, he had played football with some of the kids that were there at the school. And it's just, everybody's just heartbroken. It's just heartbroken. You never think this is going to happen in your community. And it happens, and we're here, and the families deserve to mourn. Our community needs to mourn for now and heal, but we are going to need change. When the dust settles, 21 families were destroyed, and so many more families are just damaged forever. And we need change. We need some sort of change. We need help. Our community needs help.
And as a parent who has kids in the district, what was your reaction when you heard the Justice Department is now going to open this investigation into the police response at the elementary school? I mean, children were calling 911, begging for help as these officers were waiting in the hallway. You heard the Department of Public Safety saying on Friday that they made the wrong decision. I can't imagine how people are feeling about all that.
It's just devastating to hear that when you put all your faith and you back up your community PD and law enforcement. We've been going through a lot in this community recently. There's a lot of things going on before the shooting, and you try and support local PD as much as possible because they take an oath to protect us. And if they fail to protect those children, it's devastating and it's heartbreaking. And it's easy for a lot of people to sit here and say, if I was there, I would have gone in. I mean, I wasn't there, but had my son been in that building, or somebody that I know, or any children, I would have ran in, and so many people would have. There was parents and families running in there, bystanders running in to get their kids and other children out, help. And it's a huge letdown. At the end of the investigation, if it does come out that they could have done more, it's going to be a huge letdown for the community and the families.
And a lot of these kids don't want to go back to school now.
No, I don't blame them. I know a family member that was in there, and I can't imagine what he saw in there. It was a massacre. These poor defenseless children had no chance because there's AR-15s that you could just go and buy at 18 years old. You could just go and buy it with this permitless gun carry that we have in Texas. It's crazy. You could just go buy. You can't buy a pack of smokes, but you can buy an AR-15 with however many rounds of ammo you want. My son had just toured Robb Elementary days before. He was touring the school because he was going to go to second grade there. And my first thought was, when I went to Robb, it's fourth grade. I lived less than half a mile from the school. I walked and rode my bike, and I had a great time doing that. I had many memories walking to school, and my thought was, I can't wait to teach my son to get to school responsibly and walk and cross the road properly. And I was just so ecstatic because he was going to be so close to my home. And now we don't know what we're going to do with our kids next year. Every family in Uvalde County, we don't have many options here.
All right. Well, Ben Gonzalez, I hope there's some answers for your community very soon. You deserve it. It's been through too much. Ben, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Please get our message out to the politicians. We can come together. We don't need to be so far on the opposite end of the spectrum. We can meet in the middle and make change happen on so many fronts. It's not just one issue. It's not just a gun issue or a mental health issue. It can be both, and it is both. And please don't forget about Uvalde. Please don't forget about us. Our families need prayers, many, many prayers.
We won't, Ben.
Thank you.
And we are praying. Thank you. We'll be right back.
this place we all belong.
When we decide we want to rise up and do something, when we come to connect with and care about each other and think, now I want to do something about what's happening with them and human trafficking around the world. My name is Sarah Davison Tracy. I'm an author, and I just published a book called No Longer Untouchable, a story of human trafficking, heroism, and hope. I wrote the book over the last 7 years in collaboration with 5 young women, 4 of whom were trafficked out of Nepal into India. Devi Sarahana Bhatti is one of our 5 storytellers. She has been a leader. She has been a visionary for this book, but also for her people in Nepal.
I have 1 brother and 5 sisters. One sister, she was sold out into brothels in India when she was very little. So it was very long time, my parents and we were looking for her. But there was a big challenge for us how to rescue her, how to, get her back to Nepal. I wrote this book with the hope and the dream that these stories would elevate these young women's voices and would bring freedom to the many, many millions who are not yet free.
In China, no wallet, no problem. Here, using an app on your phone to make purchases is an everyday practice. The industry so far has been dominated by private companies. That could soon change. China's new digital currency, known as the e-yuan, made headlines at the Winter Olympic Games, a centralized virtual form of currency that can be used just like money across the country.
I think the rollout at the Beijing Olympics is designed in some ways to show the flag internationally.
Other parts of the world have similar ambitions. The European Central Bank announced plans to create a digital version of the euro, aiming to achieve this milestone by 2026. The United States, the world's biggest economy, is currently in the research phase of its own digital dollar, but will not yet proceed, citing concerns around financial stability and privacy.
As the nation grapples with the massacres in Buffalo and Uvalde, there have been 2 more mass shootings. CNN's Nadia Romero joins me now from Atlanta. Nadia, what do we know about these incidents so far?
Well, Jim, gone are the days that we talk about these incidents only happening in big metropolitan areas. Let's go to Taft, Oklahoma. It's a town about 45 miles outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And there, police say that 1 person is dead, 7 people were shot. And this happened at a Memorial Day festival. Police were expecting about 1,500 people to be out early this morning to enjoy the Memorial Day holiday. But it ended up in a shooting. No one's in custody, but there is a press conference happening right now where we're hoping to learn more information about that investigation. And now let's head to Chattanooga, Tennessee. This shooting happened late Saturday night, just about a mile or so from the Tennessee Aquarium, so a populated area. And police there tell us that 6 people were shot, 2 of them with life-threatening injuries. And Jim, police say that all of the people that were involved in that Chattanooga, Tennessee shooting were young people. They were teenagers or in their early 20s. And we just looked up numbers from the Gun Violence Archive. They tell us that there have been about 220, Jim, mass shootings. So 4 people or more shot so far this year. And we've yet to even reach halfway through this year. Jim.
And Nadia, these shootings are putting Americans on edge, obviously. You're also tracking a third incident in New York that could have ended very differently. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Jim, last night in New York at Barclays Center, there was a boxing match. A lot of people were inside this arena to see this happen when people thought they were inside of an arena when there was an active shooter. You got to take a look at this chaotic video that unfolded. Take a look. So you can see people there were running and yelling, trying to find a place to hide or get away. The New York Police Department telling CNN that there was actually not a shooting, but they say it was a sound disturbance that people thought was gunshots fired. Jim, tennis star Naomi Osaka was in there. She tweeted that people were yelling, there's an active shooter, and people were trying to hide and barricade themselves in rooms. This is where we are in our country right now, that people are so fearful of going out, being at a weekend festival to celebrate the holiday, to go to a grocery store or a school shooting. This is what that fear looks like now. Jim?
Yeah. We're all starting to think maybe we're next. That's the sad state of affairs right now. Nadia Romero, thank you very much. Quick break, we'll be back.
Wherever you go in the world, one airline goes further to make it feel exceptional. Qatar Airways, going places together.
She grows bigger and bigger, right?
A mother.
Happy birthday, honey.
Caught in a war.
We should not forget, we should not forgive.
Her story.
We have these new threats from Russia is because they're very angry. We are angry too.
And one anchor's journey to meet her.
So nice to meet you.
Has it helped making videos?
Maybe I will die, but this video will be left behind.
An Anderson Cooper 360 special report. A mother's diary of war. Monday.
With Bitcoin, not only do we have the best monetary asset in human history, we have the best monetary network in human history. Bitcoin solved a lot of the monetary functions that we know as very expensive with cryptography and with math. And so I can escrow a bearer instrument in Bitcoin. It's worth the same amount in Chicago as it is in London, as it is in Nigeria, as it is in Argentina, and I can zip it around the world instantly and for free. What we can do is take your dollars and escrow them around the world over the Bitcoin network. So think about this. What if I wanted to send money from Chicago to London? What we can do is take dollars out of your bank account, turn it into Bitcoin, zip that value to London instantly and for free. You blink, you'd miss it. It goes so fast and it costs nothing. And then we turn it back into British pounds. That's the innovation, and that's how we use Bitcoin, the monetary network.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
CNN 10. My name is Carl Azus. I'll be your explainer-in-chief.
Relevant stories, complex issues explained, all in 10 minutes. CNN 10, a virtual learning resource you can use at home. Stream at cnn.com/CNN10.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
The Uvalde school massacre has left millions of Americans profoundly shaken, and the shock of this violent tragedy has many parents asking, what do we say to our kids? 2014 top 10 CNN hero Annette March Greer, who helps children and their families cope with grief, share some advice.
The tragedy that we all just experienced in Texas has resulted in a traumatic event that has impacted not just Texas families. Children around the world may experience some type of stress response. It could trigger previous crises that they may have experienced. And it's really important for adults to observe the reactions that their children may have as a result of this event. Having sleep problems, eating problems, having anxiety and worries. They may be more clingy to their parents. They may even have a fear of going to school. Hug your child. Ask them questions about their feelings. Don't provide more information than what they're asking. Help them to understand that things happen sometimes and we have no answers. Keep some type of structure and routine in their lives.